Hi, and welcome to RecoverED, a podcast from the Magdalen House, a recovery community for alcoholism. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we share an episode from one of our 3 podcast series. The RecoverED podcast is made to educate the community on alcoholism, the Magdalen House, our programs, and resources we offer to the community. In each episode, you will get to know the disease of alcoholism a little better, and soon you'll know how you can shatter the stigma around alcoholism in your community. With your host, me, Laura Wilson, recovered alcoholic and communications coordinator here at the Magdalen House. We are so glad you're here. Thanks for listening. Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of Studying the Steps. My name is Laura Wilson, and I am the communications coordinator here at the Magdalen House. And today I have Cooper Green, who is our men's community coordinator. So welcome, Cooper.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So what step will we discuss today?
I was told we're talking about steps 8 and 9, so I hope that's what we're talking about.
That is absolutely what we are talking about. What are steps 8 and 9?
So steps 8 and 9, I can paraphrase, but it's making a list of those that we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them, and then making direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others.
Yes, we will definitely hit on that today. What does the book say about these steps?
So the book says, on page 76, says we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. If we haven't the will to do this, then we ask until it comes. And I believe that this is a step that needs to be fully consummated if we're to, have a true experience with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and that spiritual awakening that the book talks about over and over again.
When did this step become important to you in your recovery journey?
So I have been to treatment like 4 times. I've worked the steps. I'm doing that in quotation if you can't see me. A dozen times. And to me, what the amends looked like when I was like 18 was saying that I'm sorry. Saying that I'm sorry and then continuing to do the behavior, which is why I was saying I was sorry. So there was no real change. And I think the word amend, it's not, say sorry or apologize. It's to change. When I finally understood that I couldn't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it, and I needed a God of my understanding to rewrite my DNA from the ground up, it became imperative for me to make those changes, because amend is to change and not to say I'm sorry. So when I realized the gravity of the situation, I took those amends much more seriously and did my best to grow as a man. The rooms are where I learned how to be a man and how to show up for the world.
Right. Yeah, I love that. When you say that you were saying the first time that you, quote unquote, did the steps, and then you went and said, I'm sorry, and you apologized, I think most people think that making an amends is going to someone and apologizing for the behavior and also going into detail about what behavior they are apologizing for. Did you have any misconceptions about these steps, or what does the book say an amends actually is?
So the book says that an amends is to change the behavior, and I think early on I thought that it was just addressing what I had done wrong and making a promise to not do it again. Mm-hmm. But it was all very surface level. To the point where my family was tired of hearing amends from me. You know, I'd go into treatment for like 30 days. I would come out and say, I'm a changed man. I'm totally different. I understand now. And then, a month or 2 later, I'm getting kicked out of the sober living, being asked to leave the treatment center, spending nights in jail. My grandma's had many calls at like 4 o'clock in the morning, please come pick me up from Highway 6. So, but I was never actually willing to change the behavior, change who I was. I had very surface level understanding of the 12 steps and what God was.
Step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. When and how did you make that list? Like, where did those people come from?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I got a big portion of that list from my 4th step. And I know this last 4th step I wrote, I actually put my heart and soul into it, created a body of work outlining the causes and conditions by which I drink. And so I pulled a lot of people from that list, but then I also, spent several days in prayer as to where I would find these names, because there were amends that I needed to make to those who I wasn't necessarily like resentful towards. So yes, I pulled a lot from my 4-step, but also I pulled from like deep within the heart, you know?
Was there anyone that you were not willing to make amends to, or, you know, when that person was on your list, you were thinking, how am I supposed to approach this? There's no way. Like, did you talk to your sponsor? Did you find something in the book? Did you pray until you were willing? What happens when there's a person that you are not ready to make amends to?
So on page 76, the 8th step prayer is, if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. So yes, there were people who had definitely harmed me, and I asked my sponsor, I was like, why am I going to go make amends to somebody who like beat me up, stole my car, you know, etc. And he's like, well, you just got to pray for the willingness. And if you have the willingness, like, we'll address that when it comes.
When you say you prayed for the willingness, was there anyone that it took a particularly long time for that willingness to come, or was that willingness kind of instant, or like, what did that look like for you?
Not instant. And I mean, my mother was, can I say this? She was an abusive alcoholic. So she drank herself to death. She died like 3 years ago. And it was one of the amends that I was unwilling to make unless she was sober for the amends. And, you know, I kept praying for that willingness, and I would talk to my sponsor, and he said, you know, how selfish are you to like not want to make this relationship right just because she's not in a place to do so. And so I got to, you know, make that amends, and it was very, very powerful. And it was because I prayed to have that willingness that I feel like, I mean, it wasn't a perfect, you know, reconciliation, but because of that, like when my mom did pass away from this disease, I got to feel like I left things in the right place.
Yeah, I love that. Is the amends for the other person, or is it for us?
I mean, ultimately, it's for us. I mean, I think that sounds selfish, but like it is. Because if I'm clearing out the wreckage of my past, I just need to know that as someone who's sober and is trying to clean up that wreckage, clean up my side of the street, all I have to do is be willing. How they respond to that amends, if they're even willing to hear that amends, it's great if they are, but ultimately, like, I'm getting rid of that weight on my heart so that I can be connected to a power greater than myself. The book says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. And I'm going to be unable to do that if I have guilt and shame pressing down on me because of the actions I did, you know, years ago when I was very, very sick. On my mirror, I have, I see this every day when I get in and out of the shower. It says, I'm a precious child of God, no matter what I tell myself. And as a guy who's, you know, been homeless, committed burglaries, you know, embezzlement, I mean, lots of things. I carried around this negative self-image as to, you know, how far gone I was and how unforgivable I was. You know, I felt like I had this tarnished soul and I was unredeemable. And that's just not true, you know. Through the 12 steps and through getting sober, God has given me a second chance at life, and he's given me a grace. So I need to give myself the same grace if I want to be of maximum service to those around me.
Yeah, I love that. So when making amends, the book will say 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. Did you have any amends where the unexpected happened, or where you didn't have a positive experience, or the person either wasn't willing to hear your amends or just had a negative reaction to you trying to make the amends?
Yeah, I have a few stories. So I'll talk about the unexpected one first. I went through and knocked out a lot of my family members, those I was close to and those I was close to in proximity. And then it came time to go start tackling the amends back home. And I was so full of fear, so full of nervousness. I mentioned, like, I committed some burglaries. I'd done some criminal behavior, one of which I had broken into the community theater in my hometown. And I had stolen, I was very, very drunk, but I had taken like 12 wigs, a trombone, and a bunch of other props from the theater department. And I don't think I sold them or did anything with them other than I just like to steal. You know, when Cooper gets drunk, he loves to steal things. And I was going through with my sponsor saying, okay, it's, you know, time to start tackling some of these more heavy criminal offenses. Trombones are expensive, I've learned. But so I prayed I prayed to have the willingness to go make that amends, and I set up a plan. I was going to take a battle buddy with me down to my hometown and figure it out. And just like the weekend before, I went to go see a production of Hadestown. It's a wonderful musical if you ever get a chance to see it. Beautiful music. And we're sitting there watching the show, and the guy sitting next to me just like gives me like a funny feeling. I'm like, who is this guy? Whatever. And by the end of the show, we stand up after, and it turns out that is the the director of that community theater,
Oh, no.
who I hadn't seen in probably 8 years. And I was like, oh my God, like this is the time I get to make this right. Like he's the person in charge over there. And so after the show, we like stood up and we made that eye contact, and he was like, oh my God, Cooper, how are you? You look great. Because I haven't been drinking for a little bit.
Right.
And I got to say I'd love to speak with you about some ways that I've harmed your community and your organization. And I listed out the itemized list of what I had taken, and I had gone through the trouble of writing up an estimate as to what I thought they cost, like non-human hair wigs versus human hair wigs. The average cost of like an old trombone. But part of my ACE step was finding out all the information. I'm going to clearly identify the cost of what I've taken from you, and I'm going to be willing to make that right. And so I talked to him. I talked to Eric, and he was like, Cooper, like, I'm just so glad that you're okay. We never noticed that anything was missing, and I've actually been sober for 3 years myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was like super duper weird, kind of kismet or like coincidental, I don't know, but within a week of me being willing and finding the willingness to make that amends, sure enough, the guy pops up, from a different town in Texas, just happens to be sitting right next to me, in downtown Dallas, at the I forget the name of the theater, but Hadestown.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's definitely such a God moment, and definitely that reminder that everything's on God's time and not our time, for sure.
Another couple stories of amends.
Yeah.
When I finally went home after 2 years, and this was really important too, because I have a history of going to treatment, getting out, making those amends way too early. My sponsor said it would be imperative for me to like get out of treatment, get a job, and live as a sober man for at least a year before I made some of those amends to my family, because at that point, when I was making the amends before, I hadn't actually changed as a person. God, in my understanding, has not changed me foundationally. It's just the same sick man saying he's sorry for the same things like he did a year before, and a year before that, and a year before that. So I waited till I was like 2 years sober to go make these amends, and that was like one thing that was kind of weird and different. But most of my family was pretty receptive, but my uncle in particular was like, Cooper, I don't want to know how you've harmed me or my family. I'm just real glad that you're doing what you're doing. So I called my sponsor immediately, like, did I mess up? Like, does he need to hear what I have to say? Like, me? Mm-hmm. He's like, no, you were willing, and he told you where he's at with, like, y'all's relationship. So I got to respect that. So that's one of the amends I didn't get to make, but, like, I still made because I was willing.
Right.
And I got that freedom around it. But probably the best experience I had around making these amends, it wasn't, being dismissed from, criminal burglary or not having to actually do the one with my uncle, but it was with my older sister. She is 6 years older, and she somewhat raised me, and we're, thicker than thieves. She's like my best friend now. But I lived in downtown Waco at probably the height of my drinking. So to like paint a picture, I was picked up by the police frequently for being, downtown Waco, like in the square, with no shoes on, a banjo on one hand and a ukulele in the other. My head is like half shaved, where it looks like I have male pattern baldness, and I was like 24 at the time. And I was screaming at cars. So like what my alcoholism looked like was I was a delirious, like vagrant, like homeless person, people like with their families would see me on the side of the street and like cross, so that way they didn't have to pass by, because that's how unapproachable, scary, and terrifying I was. Now at the time, when I'm in the middle of my drinking, I thought that I was just a regular guy, like a little eccentric, but like people knew I was like cool, and so when I made that amends to her, I listed, I've been distant from my relationship with you. I've treated our mother poorly. I've treated her grandmother poorly. I bounced in and out of treatment. I've totaled cars. I've held our family hostage for the last, 8 years, with my alcoholism. And, the way my sponsor has, like, the format he has is to make the approach, find the time, list the ways I know that I've harmed them and what I plan to do to make it right, and then ask if I've left anything out as being, like, the most important, big, bold, underlined, everything. And, I'd done a few amends, so I thought I was off the hook and knew what I was doing. And my sweet sister, she looked me in the eye and she said, Cooper, you've embarrassed me and our family, for the last 10 years. She would be downtown, Waco, she lived downtown, eating dinner with her friends, and they would see me across the street, like, screaming at cars and harassing people, like a dirty homeless man.
Wow, yeah.
And up until that point, I was living in delusion as to how my alcoholism looked, how I interacted with the world, and how the world perceived me. But it was a very humbling and, like, sobering realization to know, like, how bad it was. And if I hadn't been willing to make that amends and invited her to tell me things that I left out, I would still be living in delusion, thinking that I'm crushing it. And I'm talking, like, living in a tent by the Brazos River underneath the railroad tracks, thinking, like, I'm doing great.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
It wasn't that bad.
It's not that bad.
Yeah,
I can still control it. We've talked a lot about making your amends in the beginning of you working the steps. So do you have to have all of your amends done before moving on to 10, 11, and 12?
Absolutely not. You're not going to deprive yourself of the opportunity to grow and enlarge in your spiritual life just because you have some amends hanging out. That is not right. I do believe you should do your best to, like, make all of those amends eventually, but I think that you should start doing 10, 11, and 12 as soon as you can.
Are there any amends that you still have yet to make?
I do have a couple of amends to do. My father is deceased. He died when I was 18, and a lot of what that amends looks like is, like, I'm not doing you service as, like, your son. And that I'm a changed man, but his grave is actually in Huntsville, Texas, in a maximum security prison. So going out and doing a graveside amends is something that's on my to-do list. But what was another one that took a while? I worked at a yogurt place, and I embezzled a few $1,000s worth of yogurt because, like, the cute girls would come in and I would give them free yogurt, and you do that like a dozen times in a week. It adds up. But I got to go do that, and I made the approach. I didn't have anybody's contact information, like the owners, but I walked in there and I said, like, hey, I'm Cooper Green. I would like to talk to so-and-so regarding this. And I was very politely asked to not come back because, like I said, I was very, very drunk in 2016. And, so they politely told me, just to get lost. But I feel like I made that right because I was willing.
Right. So just because you made all of your big amends, are you finished making amends, like, for the rest of your program, or do you have to continue to make amends? And if so, what do those amends look like today?
Yeah, absolutely. The next step 10, is we continue to make wrong the rights as they come. I'm paraphrasing that. But yeah, I am still a human being and fallible, and I step on the toes of my fellows. And, sometimes I feel in my heart that I've harmed somebody, and they say, Cooper, what are you talking about? But I make that amends promptly because that's what I need to do to keep my side of the street clean. So yes, I'm constantly making amends. Hopefully not too many, but yeah, if I mess up, like, it's a little bit more than saying my bad. It's, this is how I've harmed you. This is what I plan to do to make it right. Like, I would like to change and behave in a different way. And being able to make those amends, it's helped my relationship with my family, my girlfriend, my friends, because I'm not too prideful to, like, be unwilling to admit that I'm wrong. And that's, like, a big change from, drunk Cooper to sober Cooper.
Right, yeah, that ego is not your amigo. So I know that you did not go through the Magdalen House, but you have been a staff member and part of our community for a while now. How has either working or just being a part of the Magdalen House, how has that helped you better understand or work this step?
Well, I would say, compared to other places that I've worked or been to treatment, I believe everybody on staff is working a good program. And I've been made amends to, like, promptly, quickly, and I feel invited to be myself and to, like, have opinions on things and to be able to communicate effectively. I don't know how many bosses or coworkers I've been with where I feel like I'm walking around on eggshells and, like, this is not a topic and this is something we don't talk about or challenge. And I love the Magdalen House. Magdalen House's dedication to growing and improving and, like, evolving. So, I mean, things are always changing here, and I don't think we'd be able to do that if we didn't have a good program in place. So, yes, like, I've got to make amends to coworkers, I've got to make amends to clients, and I feel very, very welcome to grow spiritually while I'm, you know, at the Magdalen House.
What would you tell someone who is nervous to make amends, or if they're nervous to look at the people on that list of harm? What would you tell someone about steps 8 and 9 if they're nervous to do either one of them?
I would say it's a necessary part of your recovery and your growth as, like, a new person. If you feel uncomfortable making the amends, then that's probably a sign that you need to make it. And another thing, like, I would really like to touch on is that top of page 83, it says, yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. So I remember being 2 years sober, coming home. It was my grandmother's 75th birthday. It was like a blowout. And I really expected them to roll out a red carpet, and that I'd been sober for a little bit. I'd held a job for like 6 months. And I thought I was, like, big man on campus or whatever. And instead, all the women kept their purses, in the master bedroom closet because I love to steal. And so I had this idea that, I'm coming home and everybody's so excited to see me. And that's just not true. I was still not trustworthy. People hadn't lived with me or seen me. They just know all the ways that I've harmed them. And so, I was really discouraged and, like, upset, because selfish, egotistical me. Don't they know who I am now?
Right.
But I'll tell you, like 4 years later, this was just like this past summer, I went to go stay with my sister. She's got, like, a 1-year-old baby, and she was like, Cooper, I want you to, like, stay at my house. Here's a key so you can, like, let yourself in and out. It's more convenient. And so, like, this dirty, grimy, like, violent, homeless man is now, like, has a key to his sister's house. And that took years and years of, like, doing this program, but slowly but surely I've been able to trust with my family. And but the book says there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. So just because you get 30 days sober or you graduate Maggie's, do not expect to come home and, like, be treated like some kind of hero. Like, I mean, what is it? Congratulations, you're no longer harming us.
Right.
Right? So I know it might be discouraging to not, be trusted, like, immediately or to feel validated, but all that comes, with diligence and work and putting this program first consistently over a period of time. And when your family and your loved ones start seeing the changes within you and they're commenting on it, I mean, that's when you really know, like something's working as far as the 12 steps. What is it? The 9th step promises say if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, I want to say key word there is being painstaking, uncomfortable, challenging, difficult, inconvenient. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and happiness, not we now have a new freedom and happiness. We are going to. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others, that the feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things, gain interest in our fellows, self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Keyword being if we work for them. So I think the 12 steps is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. The book talks all the time about willingness. I forget how many times it's in the book, but I think it's like 70 something in the first 160 4 pages. That's like almost every other page you're seeing the word willing. Willingness is imperative to me, having an experience with this thing. Book says faith without works is dead. No middle of the road solution. Half measures availed is nothing. So I equate it to like going to the gym pretty often. If I'm going to half measure my amends, I'm going to get half measure results.
Right.
You get out what you put into this thing, and I can honestly say, like, I've given my all to making these amends and making things right between businesses, family members, partners, and for that, like, I'm a better man.
Cooper, thank you so much for being here today. It has been awesome hearing you talk on steps 8 and 9. This has been RecoverED, hosted by Laura Wilson and brought to you by the Magdalen House. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.